Hey there, I want to talk to you today about making cabochon pendants. I realize there's a great many videos available out on the web that teach techniques for making cabochon jewelry, and I watched several of them before attempting to make pendants myself that I'm using for these flower arrangements that'll be table decorations for a family reunion. And while the videos I watched were helpful, none of them seemed to address the issues that I encountered while learning how to make these, specifically air bubbles and color bleed. And so it was through trial and error that I was able to formulate a technique that has become pretty foolproof for making a good quality cabochon pendant, and that's what I want to share with you today. The first thing that I want to tell you is that I use Annie Howe's Glamour Seal. A lot of the videos out there will tell you to use this, and so this was my first attempt, and I ordered it and I'm very pleased with it, so I recommend it. The second thing you want to do is you want to make sure you start with quality photo paper. The first photo paper I used said that it was premium photo paper. I believe it was Jet Print Photo Premium, but what ended up happening is it wasn't color fast enough to endure putting Annie Howe's on it and then putting a glass on it and moving it around. Instead, what happened is that the color kind of swirled around and lifted off, so it didn't remain on the paper. This paper that I have here is HP Premium Plus photo paper. I'm sure there's a lot of photo papers out there, others that will work just as well. I just know for a fact that this photo paper works very well for me. Then you have, of course, your glass. This is a 30 by 40 millimeter and the tray that goes with it. And I have put a cutting board, just a regular kitchen cutting board here as to have a good flat hard surface, and I've covered that with a piece of wax paper. So the first thing I do once I have all my components in place is that I clean the glass with a little bit of rubbing alcohol on a cotton ball. One of the videos I watched, the lady on there said to do that, and I think that's a great idea, especially if you have tried to make a pendant with the glass and have messed up, and so you've cleaned it off. You want to make sure all that residue is off. You want to make sure there's no lint on there, so you clean it with the alcohol and then just wipe it down with a cloth to dry it. And so once you've done that and you've printed your photo on a premium photo paper, you want to put just a little bit of Annie Howe's in the center of the glass. Some people put it on the picture. That works well too. But the most important part of this step is to make sure that you don't use too much, because it's going to squish out the sides. You want a thin layer, and so you don't want to waste it. So I put about this much Annie Howe's on there, and then I turn it over and lay it directly on the print that I have made. Now, then you're going to push just lightly with your finger, and your goal here is to make sure that the Annie Howe's gets around all edges. You want to make sure that that liquid product reaches all edges. So you may have to move the glass a little bit to get it to travel. You just want to make sure that you have a bond between your paper and your glass by using the Glamour Seal. So what happens then after you do that is you can see all these air bubbles that have cropped up from having done that. And so you can put your finger on the glass and press a little, and you can watch a lot of these air bubbles start to travel out the sides. So you want to do that to begin with, still making sure that you have plenty of Glamour Seal that reaches all the edges. But generally speaking, try as you may, you're not going to be able to get all of the air bubbles out. You're still going to be left with some under there that kind of get trapped, and no matter how much you press or move the glass around, you're not going to be able to get them out, because the Glamour Seal starts leaving out from under the glass, and it is the vehicle for actually allowing the bubbles to move out. And so once that starts becoming a thin enough layer, you're not going to have enough adhesive under there to scoosh those out from under it. And so what you want to do at this point, and this is the technique that really will work for me, and I've not seen anyone else do this, is that you want to lift that glass up like that. And then you want to apply just a little bit of Glamour Seal, about as much as you did before, right in the center of the glass. You're going to already have Glamour Seal still on there from your first application and some on your paper. And then you're going to turn this over and put it right back down there. And what's going to happen is that Glamour Seal is going to squish out, and it's just going to fill all the gaps that kind of get created when you lift that glass up. It's going to fill any gaps where there had been air bubbles before. You're going to move that around just a little bit like you did before to make sure that you have Glamour Seal all around all edges. You don't want any kind of ragged edge at one end or the other where the Glamour Seal is so thin that it doesn't suck the paper up to the glass. Once you've done that, you're left with something that looks kind of like this, and I have no air bubbles under there at this point, but I don't want to leave it this way because, as you see, I can't see the picture under there. That's pretty opaque. And what will end up happening if I left that under there, it would dry and it would dry clear, but it would have a crackling effect because there's too much Glamour Seal on there. It would have an effect like an antiquing type of effect. And so I don't want that to happen. I want it to be smooth and clear. So my goal here is to press, starting from the center, press pretty well, because you want that Glamour Seal to exit. You want it to scoosh out from under that glass all the way around. And so I'm going to work with that just a little bit to try and press that out. And you might see a few air bubbles in there as you go. Just make sure that when you do, you press in a way that will push those air bubbles out. Now at this point, I've squished out just quite a bit, but it's still pretty opaque. I can see some of the picture over here. So I'm going to pick this up like this, and using my finger as a guide underneath, I'm going to start in the center and start pressing. And as you press, you can see the picture start to appear underneath, because what's happening is that the Glamour Seal is getting displaced, and if you'll look, it's coming out over here, and that's your goal. You want that Glamour Seal to come out because you want to be left, and you will get probably a little bit of Glamour Seal on the glass as you go. Don't worry about that. That comes off pretty easily after it dries. So I'm trying hard not to move my glass around too much on the paper to disturb that and introduce more air bubbles. Instead, I'm just moving my finger along the bottom. I'm starting in the center and pressing, and then moving out toward the edges. And like I say, you can watch the picture start to appear underneath because the Glamour Seal is coming out from under, and it's squishing out the edges. Once you get the picture to a point that you can see everything on it and you feel good about how much Glamour Seal is left on there, and you have it recentered, I have a tiny spot underneath here, I don't know if you can see it or not, where the paper no longer is touching the glass because the Glamour Seal is kind of pulled away. So I'm going to use my finger under here and press it so that I'm going to work some of that Glamour Seal out to that edge and fill that gap, because I want it to be completely filled into there. Then I'm going to recenter my glass, and I'm going to leave that to dry. I'm not going to worry about any of this that's on top of the glass around the edges, because what's going to happen, I'll show you one that is finished that has some of that on there. See, here's one I did, and you can see that I have Glamour Seal that has dried on it. So to finish this out, once it's completely dried, is I'm going to take a good sharp pair of scissors. These are just some little craft scissors that I picked up at Walmart. Really cool deal for about 15 bucks. They're very sharp. I'm going to go around the edge of the glass and cut away the excess paper, just like that. And then to get the excess Glamour Seal off, I have a piece of a magic eraser. This is just a generic magic eraser. And it's barely wet. If I squeeze it, I can feel the dampness, but it doesn't squeeze water out. So you don't want it to be overly wet, but you do want it to be damp. And then I'm going to just go over the top of the glass, and it will slough off. I'm just gently rubbing, and it sloughs off any excess dried Glamour Seal that is on there. There's some right there. Depending on how much you leave on there, it may take a little more rubbing. And there's some on the edges, so I'm going to rub the edges also. Until that comes off, and I'm satisfied that it looks the way I want it to. And once I get it to that point that I like the way it looks, I'm going to dry that off. And then I'm going to put a little bit of Glamour Seal on the back of the picture. About like that. And then flip that over and put that right down in the tray. Like that. And leave it to dry for a couple of hours just so that it'll cure. And the Glamour Seal will make a really good adhesion. It will not come out of the cabochon tray. And I just wanted to impress one more time about how important it is to not use too much Glamour Seal and to have a thin layer left to dry. Because a lot of the videos that I watched said it takes 10 to 15 minutes for the Glamour Seal to dry, but for me it has been more like a 24-hour period for it to completely dry and cure. And the other thing is, if you leave too much Glamour Seal on there, if I had indeed left this to the point that it was still opaque, what would have happened is that I would have had some crackles under here. I had one. This one has a little bit of crackling that I had done before. I don't know if you can see it in the camera or not. It's very faint. It's more like an antiquing effect, and perhaps you want that, but I didn't. I wanted mine to be completely crystal clear. So it's real important not to leave too much of the Glamour Seal on the product. You want just a very thin layer left there to dry. And so that's all I have for you. I just hope that helps you as far as keeping air bubbles out and making a good clear cabochon pendant from a piece of photo paper that's got a print on it for you. If you have any questions, leave them below. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.